Improvisational theme song. I'm back. Hello and welcome. I know it's been a while. I know. And welcome to Here There Be Monster Fuckers. The not weekly anymore show, but it was weekly, but not anymore. The weekly podcast where we talk about all things monster fucking and why it's amazing and why I love it. Alright, so elephant in the room. Yes, I know it's been a while since I've uploaded anything. The reason is because life. It's just me sitting in my room recording these because I really want to, because they bring me joy and they have fun. But when life gives you lemons and you try to make lemonade and then you start drowning in all the lemonade and then you realize you're allergic to lemons but you're already drowning in lemonade, so you have an anaphylactic shock and it just goes horrible, one thing after the other. So this podcast was one of the things that I kind of had to put on hold for a while. I was never doing it because I, need to do a amazing podcast. No, I did it because it was fun. And it's a nice little creative outlet for me. But when the going got rough, I was like, okay, I need to pull back on this, focus on myself, focus on getting settled, focus on my mental health, all that kind of stuff. And I was also sick before, so that wasn't the greatest. And yeah, so this is me going through and picking up back not where I left off, but just picking back up with something that I truly enjoy. So if you're still here and you were listening before, and if you're angry at me, I'm not sorry. I did what I had to do. But if you're happy I'm back, then yay, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad to be back too. So, what are we doing today? Well, I am actually going to review my first series on the channel. Ooh, the channel. This isn't YouTube. The podcast. I've watched way too much YouTube. So, my first series, hopefully I do another one. I'm actually in the process of reading another book series, but I'm not sure if all the books for that one are out yet. I'm not sure. I'll have to check. And if they are, I'll continue reading through it and hopefully get a review up for that one. But for right now, this is the first series on this podcast. So what is the series? Well, the series is called Fire in His Blood, a post-apocalyptic dragon romance. And it's called the Fireblood Dragon books, right? And there are 10 of them in the series. And all of them have fire in the title, right? So there's fire in his fury, fire in his spirit, fire in his embrace. All of this fiery kind of stuff, which, I guess since it is dragons, that is pretty on brand, but at the same time I don't know why it really made me laugh after a while, just fire, 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 fire. Sorry if my voice is a little raspy. Where I'm living now has some of the worst air quality in the world. What was it, last week? The pollution here was about 200, almost 300, where the average place in the United States is 50. So New York on a bad day, or LA on a bad day, gets to 100, right? That's a bad day in LA. So imagine what 300 is like. My poor voice, I don't even want to think about my lungs, but anyway, it's okay. It's just where I ended up. And there are other nice things too. But, so, Fire in His Blood. This was a very interesting series for me to go through and read. Like I said, there are 10 books in here total. And one of the interesting things I noticed, especially about looking at the cover art, is that it's so it looks like they had regular people and then just photoshopped a bunch of stuff onto the sexy guys that are on the front covers. And I didn't notice this before. I don't know how I didn't notice this before, but this just seems to be a normal thing where you have a guy, and then if it's a monster fucker book, you just go through and you just Photoshop them to make them look more monstrous, I guess. And I don't know how I feel about that. You guys already know, one of my favorite book covers of all time was from the Ensnared series because it's just so in your face. They hired an artist to be I need you to draw a spider human person And they're like, all right, yeah, bet, let's go. Or like, the previous book that I did, Sing Me to Sleep, another really beautiful, like, designed cover. So when I'm looking at these, I'm just like, wow, this looks like a romance novel. like, and that's not a bad thing. It's just a thing that I noticed. I was like, huh, oh, okay, well, all right. This is a romance novel, so let's get into it. But first, I'm trying to remember the structure that I usually have. I do have notes here, so I helped. We're going to go through the criteria again, because it's been a while, so you guys might have forgotten. So the criteria for this wonderful monster fucking review series. At first, we're going to be critiquing the story, right? You got to have it. It is technically a book, so there needs to be some type of story, some type of plot. It doesn't have to be a lot. It just has to be there, right? The second thing we're going to be critiquing are the characters. Because if I don't care about your characters, I won't care about the fucking. Like, you have the greatest fucking in all the fucking history of the fucking world, but if it's not, fun to learn about these characters and understand where they're coming from, even if where they're coming from. I'm so immature. But it's like, if I don't, like, relate to them, that's better. Then I won't care at all why they are fucking in the first place. The next thing is, the actual fucking. Like, is it good? And do I get into it? Like, this is the reason why I read these books. It's primarily for the fucking. Like, I don't know, if I had to do a percentage, like, I would say it's 60% fucking. No, 70% fucking, 30% story. I think that's, like, why I read these books. So mostly it's for the fucking. So the fucking better be, pretty fucking good. I'm sorry, it's been a while. I have a lot pent up here. And the last thing is going to be just, like, other ideas or, like, other, tidbits of information and stuff that I want to include that I feel like a reader, whoever would go through and start to read these books, would want to know. And there's actually quite a bit of that in this particular book. I don't think I'm going to stick to this exact order just because there is a lot of these types of I have personal opinions and I feel like people are going to want to know about this before they jump in type of things. So let's just go ahead and get started. So I'm going to turn the page on my notes here. All right, so this book series, Fireblood Dragon books 1 through 10, are by an author by Ruby Dixon. And I couldn't really find that much about Ruby Dixon. Actually, she's pretty well known in the monster fucker community, though. Like, she has a shit ton of books that she has published. Like, for example, this is a 10-book series, and each book is like 350-ish pages. Like, they're decent sized books. And then also she has, like, ice barbarians and, like, just a bunch of other type of, monster fucking romance novels. So I'm just like, oh, okay. Look at you, Ruby. Just, putting them out there one right after the other. I respect that. I truly do, because writing is hard. Like, if you've ever had to write anything, let alone a 10-book series, I have a deep respect for anybody that can commit that much time and dedication to doing so, let alone have several series of books that are all, like, monsters and aliens and all kinds of stuff. It's very commendable. So great job, Ruby. Clap and a half for you. Pop, pop. All right, so, but going through, I really want to get into the book synopsis first, because I think this is the part where the book series shines the most, is that, so basically the overarching setting of the story is that the world was destroyed when dragons came through, like, a tear in the sky 7 years ago, right? Nobody knew. Like, people were like, oh, dragons, they're creatures of legend. They don't really exist. And all of a sudden they just appear and they just start destroying shit. Like, they just, and, like, of course, and humanity completely collapses. Like, well, not humanity, but, like, civilization completely collapses. So, like, the military is gone, governments are gone, and basically people, live in these kind of rundown, ruined cities and try to, like, barricade themselves in to protect from dragon attacks, and it's been like this for 7 years. Ooh, so post-apocalyptic and dramatic, right? But that's honestly what drew me in to begin with the story. I was like, ooh, okay, well, we got some background, got some story, got a good setting. Because honestly, that's where the book shines the most, at least for me. So let's go into it since it's, oh, look at me! I segued! I made a very sensible segue. I'm so proud of me. If you've listened to my previous stuff, my segues aren't usually that smooth. But yeah, so let's just jump right into the story. So as far as the story goes, the world building is actually some of the most interesting parts of this story. The fact that it's like, okay, it's a post-apocalyptic setting, so how does humanity survive? Because the dragon attacks are kind of random, but kind of not. It's like, first this dragon will attack, and then another dragon will attack, and then you're safe for like 3, maybe 4 days, but you never really know. And so, people are living in places that could withstand a dragon attack. Like, so they're living in like bunkers or like old malls on like the bottom floor so fire can't get in. Like, since it's like a post-apocalyptic society, food is kind of scarce. You have to scavenge, you have to hunt, you have to be tough to survive, all these kind of things. And so that actually is very interesting for me, how the author kind of presented and goes about the ideas and the rules of this world. Because there are rules, and the more you go through and you read, the more clear those rules become, and there actually is a bit of a story that does unfold. Now, along with that story, though, I have kind of mixed feelings about it, because you get bits and pieces of information that seem very important, but ultimately all they do is more so just, tease the reader more so than actually be anything of great substance, right? Like, because at the end, all that stuff about certain stuff, you can tell I'm trying to be very very non-spoilery, but all kinds of, I would say, backstory, right? Backstory about certain things in certain places kind of ends up not really going anywhere. Like, it's interesting to know, but it doesn't really do much to help advance the story, in my opinion. So, and when it comes to the nitty-gritty, like the daily operations of this world, that's where I feel like the story kind of falters a little bit. Because, and this is my first gripe, one of the opinions that, I usually say for the last, but I'm putting it in here because it fits, is that this author, and I don't know if it's all of her books because I haven't read any of her other series, but in this series in particular, she keeps on doing this thing where she presents nearly every man as a rapist or a potential rapist. And it's, after a while, it becomes very unsettling and uncomfortable. And not even after, and when I say after a while, I mean like after book 2 or book 3. It got very uncomfortable because it was like, well, if you're going to survive out here, you either got to, scavenge and hunt for yourself, or you could do that other thing where you have sex with the officers and stuff in exchange for food and favors. And like, I would never do that kind of thing. And like, okay, great, like, but if it's really is a post-apocalyptic situation, like, would you be judging that much? Like, all right, fine. But also, like, just every single man, unless it was later on revealed that he would be with one of the female characters that we were introduced to, was a rapist. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, I get it. Men, by and large in the world commit vast amounts of sexual assault. But the idea that literally every single guy is a rapist is like every guy that you come across except for one that's like an old man is like, okay, that's a little unsettling to me. And it just bothered me. It just bothered me. And I can't quite put my finger on exactly why, but I just know that that's an element of the story that just didn't ring, didn't ring true Or, no, not that it didn't ring true. It just rang too forced. Right? It just rang too forced. Like, every single guy on this planet in these post-apocalyptic, the only thing keeping men from just following all their rapey desires is, civilization. If civilization were to collapse, and if there were no consequences, then men would just be raping all over the place, indiscriminately, apparently. Like, it just... it rubbed me the wrong way, to be honest. Like, that's really, and some people might agree with that sentiment, and I don't, which is why it bothered me. But yeah, so that's one of the things. And going through and talking about, the actual story and how that kind of progressed through the 10 books and how all 10 books kind of feed into and connect with each other, the author did a very good job of having a character that was introduced like a book ago or 1 or 2 books ago, like, reasonably come back and be important now, or like shifting to being from this current book being from that character's perspective, right? So that was very well done, because it would just be like a kind of toss away character in a previous book, but then now you're switching to their point of view, and I was just like, oh, okay. So like, the series overall does a very good job of interweaving all of these different characters and all of these different people in multiple locations and kind of bringing things together. Now, I will say that the final conclusion, or like the final big climax of like the overall plot that was built up over the course of 10 books felt a little Deus Ex Machina-ish for me. Like, it kind of felt like, it's that thing, right, where they do in movies, video games, TV shows, or whatever, where you introduce a big bad character, right? But you want us to like the big bad character, so you introduce someone even worse, like the bigger, badder character person. And now they're the big bad evil and not the thing that was before. And this works. It can work. This is a trope that's been done millions of times. But in here, it just the shift felt a little bit too quick, right? Like, that shift from introducing the original big bad to, okay, now we have an even bigger bad, happened over the span of just 2 books. Like, and the bigger bad is resolved in like 2 books. Like, it was like, whoa, oh, okay. Like, all right, fine. Like, for me, it just felt a little bit too quick and didn't kind of slowly and more like smoothly progress over a certain amount of time. But honestly, it doesn't take away too much. I'd also just feel like, even with how the story was built up, the ending still felt a bit Deus Ex Machina-y as well, where it's just like, oh, okay, well, we just magically now have the solution to fix this problem. And I'm just like, oh, okay. Or it's like the solution, once again, the solution to this problem is kind of like, okay. Okay. Like, that's literally like my thought process as I was reading it. And I was just like, I don't know how I feel about this. And I kind of want to do a spoiler section. I might save it for the end, like after the outro theme, just because this is something that was enough of a thing for me to kind of give me pause that and actually, though, there's 2 things. There's 2 things in here in this particular category that were enough to give me pause that I feel like they should be discussed, but it will be spoilers. So I'm going to save these 2 things until after the outro. So if you want to stick around for spoilers for this book series, then do that. But let's go on and go through the characters, right? So with the characters, each book, like I said, introduces a main, woman and a main dragon, a woman and their dragon, right? And so honestly, after about book 3 or 4, the characters kind of, the women and their dragons kind of started to blend together. And it's not a fault of the author at all. It's just because it's a difficult thing to do. You have, 10 different people coming in and out of this story, and it's very difficult to make all of them unique and distinct and memorable. And, she does have a few that do stand out, right? Like the characters from the first book. Honestly, after the first or second, third book, become irrelevant. Like, you don't see them much anymore. And honestly, when you do go back to them eventually, I was just like, oh yeah, you guys aren't really that memorable. Like, if I sit here and really try to recall, like, major characters, there are like 3 sets of people that come to mind. One of which comes to mind because she is actually a character that has a physical disability. And I thought that was amazing that this is included in this story. Like, this, not spoilers because you figure this out in like the first couple chapters of the first book. But before everything went to, just as everything was going to shit, this person had their leg broken. And it never healed properly. So they just have this, like, malformed leg, and it's their disability. Like, they can't walk very far, like, it hurts them, all kinds of stuff. But, like, it's still a very well done representation, I think. Like, also, there's another character that I believe is missing a hand, if I remember correctly. I think so. Yeah, I think she's missing a hand. Because once again, when everything went down and it just had to be amputated, right? Like, so there are characters in here that do cover a group of people that are not usually represented at all in, romance novels period, but especially in romance novels, to have characters that have very clear different body types is very good. And when I was reading that, I was like, oh yay. And it doesn't it's not a detractor from them at all as far as their personalities and what they do. They work around it, which is what real life people do. Like, they're still perfectly capable human beings. So I thought that was really cool. And as far as the dragons go, a lot of them are very interchangeable. Unfortunately, like I said, their personalities don't really ring out. Like, there's maybe 1 or 2 where I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, like, they were funny. Like, they had good personalities. But, I just don't think it's an easy thing to do, right? It's a very difficult thing to do. So that's as far as character goes. Like, and there's another, the third couple, saving that for the spoilers, saving that for the spoiler section, because there's a lot I want to say about them. But all right, so that's the characters, right? So let's get to the actual fucking, right? Like I said earlier, this is 70% fucking, 30% story, and so the story doesn't have to be that great, as long as the fucking is good. And I will say the fucking is pretty nice. But, like, over the course of 10 books, it does get a little bit repetitive not because the way that she writes the fucking is bad. It's just that because there are set rules for this universe, the fucking has to go in a very specific order. And, like, I think because she had the sex structured in this way, it made it a bit repetitive. And you can see later on in the books, in later books, where she's trying to overcome this, because she herself kind of understands that, yeah, going through this exact same process again and again and again does get a bit repetitive. So let's just skip it and, not skip it, but like fast forward through this and get to the cook part, which is, free fucking, free for all fucking, right? Like, because certain, standards or certain milestones need to be met before fucking can commence. That's the best way I can describe it, right? And then each time the woman is all like, what? No, I could never fucking dragon. Oh, how could I do such a fucking hell, woman? Just get on with it. And like some of them do. There's like one person that's like, all right, gotta nut up or shut up, I guess, like, just get it on. But there's still always that like hesitation, which again, makes sense within the context of the world. This is just a personal thing of mine where it's just like, I just wish there was a book, like just once, a monster fucker book where the person, woman, man, whatever, isn't like, what? I mean, but like, they're a monster. I don't know. Why do I feel this? No, just be like, monster? Cool. Let's fuck. And then just enthusiastically just go. That just goes in and just fucks. Like, is there a book series like there should be a book series like that? I will look and see if there's a book series like that is like that, because that would just be such a wonderful breath of fresh air for me. Oh gosh, but it doesn't detract too much, right? So, for like one or two books in the series, fucking is fine. But once you get into like the third and fourth and fifth and sixth, and it's the same kind of pattern happening, it's just like, oh, okay, like this is serviceable, but it is a bit repetitive, right? And so that's it overall as far as this whole book series. The fact that it is a series is very commendable. The fact that she's able to very easily interweave story beats and plots and things like that was very well done. And it's hard to write a series. There's so many different angles and parts and pieces that you need to get into. And so I commend Ruby Dixon for this. It's a very good feat. It drew me in. Like, I was still like, all right, well, I want to read the next book because I want to see what happens next. Or I want to read the next book because I want to see if this person comes back because they seemed kind of cool. Like, it was very well done. Would I recommend this book series? Yes. And when you go to the spoiler section, you'll understand why I said it like that. Because there are some things, like all men are rapists, that are just like, okay, wait, no, stop, right. Like, it's almost like she's using the all men are rapists thing as like a justification for the women choosing to have sex with dragons. Like, if all men weren't rapists, they would just go with regular men. But all men are rapists, so the only decent men are dragons, so we have to go for them. Like, it's that kind of thing, and that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And like I said, in the spoiler section, there'll be a couple other things I go into that rubbed me the wrong way. But overall, it is a good book series. You should read it. Like, it's good. There's parts that are funny. There are parts that are actually kind of really sad. One part, because I have, phobia of sickness, really got to me. I was like, oh God, oh God, oh God. Like, this is actually sufficiently terrifying, for me at least. So, yes, I will say Fire in His Blood, all the Fireblood dragon books, go through, read them. You will have a good time. They are fun. But if you want spoilers for a couple of things that may or may not be triggering, because they were a bit for me, then stay tuned after the outro. But that is all for now. Thank you so much for listening to my triumphant return to Here There Be Monster Fuckers. And yeah, I don't know if this will be weekly anymore. I'll try to do episodes when I feel like them. Like, sometimes they might be weekly, sometimes they might not. I will put my mental health and my sanity first in all things. But love you guys. Thank you so much. Keep being wonderful monster fuckers out there, and bye. Do outro music, yeah. Okay, hi. So, if you're here, then welcome to our first ever spoiler section, I think. Usually I don't feel the need to do this for books because usually I can give adequate like trigger warnings or skirt around certain examples of things from books without the need for going into full detail. But for this one in particular, there are two things that I felt like I needed to discuss a bit more, just so people could understand exactly what I meant and exactly what what you would be getting into. So the first thing I would say is that the author of this book probably has a huge pregnancy kink, because literally every single couple, so like all 10 of these couples, end up at some point having a kid, like getting pregnant and having a baby. And not only that, the babies are the key to saving the world. And I'm not even joking. Like, literally, it's so funny because how the character in the book says it so directly, but he's like, all right, I need you to have sex with this dragon and get pregnant so we can save the world. I'm just like, wait, what? What? Like, that's so interesting. Very direct. But as for me, as someone personally that has like a bit of a phobia against pregnancy, like breeding kink, yes. Pregnancy, no. And at birth, no. And also just like semi-forced pregnancy, it it bothers me. And at certain points, it kind of felt a little pro-lifey at such, which is, okay. Like, if you are pro-life, if that is your jam, if that is what you believe, good. But it wasn't my cup of tea. And so that's why when it was just like, well, no, like, you need to have a baby, or we're all having babies, like she's pregnant and now she's pregnant and she's pregnant and she's pregnant, everybody's pregnant, everybody's having babies, it's just like, what is going on here? This makes me a wee bit uncomfortable that, everyone's just busting out babies everywhere. Like, it's like literally almost at the end, not at the end, but literally at within 2 or 3 books, all right, of a character being introduced, it's revealed that they're pregnant. And it's like, okay, yeah, I mean, it's the apocalypse. There's no birth control, and you're having a lot of sex. So yes, pregnancy can and probably would ensue. But I don't know. There just seems to be an ulterior motive for all of the pregnancy. And like, I get it in romance books, for as long as time immemorial, pregnancy has always been the thing that's been like the key to, and they live happily ever after, because you hunker down, you get married, and you have kids. It's a very traditional way of going about things, all right? And so I think that's also another reason why it rubbed me the wrong way, because I hate that trope. I hate the idea, as someone who has like a pregnancy phobia and is absolutely just deathly afraid of having kids ever, the idea of you and your spouse not being complete, or not being enough, or not being, a real family unless you have a child, is just off-putting for me. So that's one of the things that I wanted to bring up, because I'm not the only one. Other people probably do have pregnancy phobias and things like that. Luckily, it doesn't really go that much into birth. It's literally just like, you're pregnant, next scene, there's a baby, okay? And now all the babies are going to work together to save the world. Wait, what? Like, that's the element of the story where I just kind of was like, all right, no, the monster fucking is fine. The baby saving the world thing is literal infants saving the world thing is kind of a little, it's a little sus, right? But that's not even my biggest thing. My biggest thing has to deal with the 2 characters that are in the final book of the series, so book 10. And basically, throughout the entire story, you hear about the dragons, and then you hear about another group of people that come from that same world that the dragons come from, that basically over the course of the book series, you find out that this group enslaved the other dragons. So this group they're called like the Silurians or something like that, are, while the other dragons are like tan and brown and like golden, amber colored, everything, whatever, this particular other group that were the slave masters of the dragons are very pale, long, pale hair. Basically, in the book, they're described as almost being albino, right? So when this former slave owner, basically, former white slave owner, is paired off with a black woman, that immediately sent my nerves tingling. Like, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, what is this? What is happening here? Like, oh, I sense something coming, and I don't like it, I don't like it, I don't like it. And yeah, it ended up being basically, the pussy is therapy, and the pussy cures racism. Like, as a black woman, I hate this trope so much. And basically, that's what it came down to, is like this former slave owner gets with a black woman, and her, along with the other black woman, make this former slave owner understand that, hey, slavery bad. Maybe you shouldn't slave anymore. Okay, good talk. Like, it just, I can understand that as, probably not a person of color, Ruby, or probably not an African American, I don't really know, I'm not sure, but this is what it feels like. They probably were trying their best. They probably were like, yes, no, this is how my real life allegory is going to work. Like, this is how people need to work through racism and racist ideas and thoughts, and, how you stop a slave owner from enslaving others. Because literally, in the book, this person is still enslaving other sentient beings. Like, this Solarian is still doing this. And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, your hastily written dragon romance novel is just not the place to try to unravel the deep, complex, interwoven, like, understanding and social dynamic of prejudice and slavery and stuff, because like it got to the point where, like, while they were trying to convince him that, hey, slavery bad, they end up leaving books out for him to read, and one of those books is like 12 Years a Slave, and it's just like, fucking because that's what does it. All the racists, all they need to do is just read 12 Years a Slave, and they'll just be like, whoa, man, slavery is wrong, we shouldn't do that anymore. Like, it's not how that works. And the fact that, like, this black woman was paired off with this guy, in the sense that's like, well, if you learn to love someone whose ancestors were enslaved, then you would realize that you could never do that to another human being, or you shouldn't do it because it makes me sad, because it reminds me of my ancestors, and you don't want me sad, right? And it's just like, that was hard to get through. Like, it was difficult to get through. As a black woman, that was very, very, the last maybe 2 books, but definitely the last book was very difficult to get through, because it's like, I'm trying to figure out the best way to describe it. It just felt so ham-fisted and so unaware and so healing the world with love kind of thing, which, works maybe sometimes, but all I can think about when I read something like that is, for example, a couple of years ago, someone decided to write a play, like a stage production, about Thomas Jefferson and his relationship with his slave named Sally. And basically they tried to paint it as something romantic, but then everybody and their mom was like, she was his slave. This was not romantic at all. She was definitely forced into this. I don't understand why you feel the need to make it seem like him, quote unquote, loving one slave somehow made him a better person when he had a bunch of other slaves as well. Like, it just doesn't work that way. So that's why my overall opinion of the book is kind of soured, because it's just like, oh god, like, because it's all in the last book. So when that's what you leave off on, that's what I take home, and what I took home was just like, oh, like, I can't describe it any other way than that. But those were the 2 major spoilery type things that I wanted to go into, just in case, this kind of thing bothers you as well, or just in case you just really wanted to know if spoilers don't bother you and you're still going to go read these books and enjoy them. Have fun. Like I said, overall, they're pretty good. It's just those couple of things, like the constant men are rapists, the pregnancy kink fetish thing going on that has some kind of pro-life tinges to it that make me a little uncomfortable, and the pussy is therapy and cures racism thing. Those are the only ones. And other than that, it's a good series. So go out, read it, thank you so much for listening to my wonderful inaugural return. And yeah, love you much. Bye, my fellow monster fuckers. Mwah!